So yeah, the thread is on our MMA, and it's 1 on Prime Video, 2 main event scorecard from one of the judges. Match scored overall by criteria and advantages, and then if you scroll down, well, there's a bit about me in the podcast. One of the Diddly Dank, thank you for shouting this out, man. I appreciate that. One of the 1FC judges has a podcast link below as a segment of him describing how it is. And then some people said it was a good podcast and that we keep it real, so I appreciate that. I'm keeping that. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So Jeremy, somebody leaked your shit, dude. I don't know what happened. He's one of the judges that comes from America, one of the guys that judges me.
Very impressive leak. How did they get hold of that?
I have no idea. I don't know who sent it out, if it was like a leak or if somebody just deliberately was trying to show it so they could show what the new scorecard looks like. I've had it since they introduced this, and this scorecard is new. When I first started, they didn't have this. But from what I was told, because of the one on Amazon Prime deal, they needed a new card that was clear. It was very concise for the betting, right? Because now they're trying to go into the American market and they can do the gambling on the American market. So this is what I was told. I don't know how true, but this is like water cooler talk, right? And so I don't know if they released this card deliberately or not. If you guys want to take a look at it, go watch the video of this podcast. Basically, it goes through all the scoring criterias. Number 1, number 2, let's go from the top. Number 1 is near KO and submission, and then it says who do you give that advantage to, and then for each category, there's a degree of advantage. So it says slight, moderate, and dominant. So if we take the number 1 scoring criteria, which is going to play back when I break down the decision in a minute, the number 1 scoring criteria is near KO or submission. Damage is number 2.
Yep.
Okay, so we got to keep that in mind, that is more important than control, and we're not looking at this round by round. Okay, so for each category, near KO, near submission, that's number 1. Number 2 is damage. You can choose the degree of the advantage. So how dominant were they in that particular category? And then it's by slight, moderate, or dominant. Okay, criteria number 3 is striking. Same thing. Who did you give the striking advantage to in the fight, and to what degree? A slight advantage, a moderate, or a dominant advantage. 3-2, we go to ground. Okay, ground game, same thing. Takedowns, jiu-jitsu. Takedowns is 4, but ground is like jiu-jitsu. And then also transitions, mount, side control, back. Then you get to takedowns, and finally aggression, which is the lowest scoring criteria.
Which is the criteria Angela said she thought she won on, which I don't disagree with. Like, she was, it says even on the card, and I thought Angela was the more aggressive fighter in terms of like pushing the pace of the fight. She was always going forward, but then she was getting damaged every time she was walking forward, which is a higher criterion one.
Yeah, and the aggression is the lowest scoring criteria.
Yep.
So I agree with you, right? Basically, actually, let's just take a look at this real quick. So according to Jeremy, God, I feel weird putting him on the spotlight. I don't know how this thing got out, but I don't even know if I should be talking about it, but it's out there, so I'm just going to rock with it.
We're about 5 minutes too late for that.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So taking so near KO submission advantage goes to Red. Red in this case is Panda, Xiong Jing Nan, by moderate. He gave it a moderate advantage near KO submission, which I find a little interesting. Moderate is right. Moderate is right, because there wasn't actually, I think Panda dropped her twice in the first round, right? So that's where the near KO and sub threat would come from, because Angela Lee, the closest she came to finish in the fight, which I don't think was that close, was maybe that where she had her in like a Darce or an Anaconda or something in the second round.
Yeah.
And, had a choke on her. And it was like a decent threat, but it wasn't really like I'm about to tap out type threat.
Yeah.
Those knockdowns were big.
The first round, I was like, dear God, talk about having heart. Angela Lee, and just getting through that first round, because she got the crap beat out of her in that first round.
Yeah, it looked like she was going to get finished.
Yeah, I thought it was going to get finished.
And then she got dropped again toward the end of that round. So this is why the near KO and sub goes by moderate advantage to Panda, and I agree with that. Okay, damage, Red, moderate advantage. I would also agree with that. Red, again, is Panda. Okay, 3, striking, Red, Angela, moderate degree. I think you could maybe make that moderate or slight.
Yeah.
Because Angela had success throughout the fight. And at certain points, particularly toward the end of the fight, she was busier.
Yeah.
Right? She was playing catch up, right? And they mentioned this on the broadcast, which I hadn't heard until today, because the only time I'd seen it was actually at the event. But I noticed that they mentioned on the broadcast that basically Panda had done all the damage first in that first round.
Yep.
And then Angela Lee is playing catch up
Yeah.
after that point, right? Which I agree with. So, but the striking, yeah, moderate, slight, something like that. That's definitely correct. And now we get to the categories where Angela had more success.
Yep.
Keeping in mind that these are the lower tier categories. Okay, ground. Okay, Jeremy Saunders gave this to Angela Lee. Yeah, I think none of us disagree with that. She was able to get takedowns. She was able to threaten a little bit, and even with the clinch, which is not technically ground, but when she's close, she was doing her best work. She was landing some knees in the clinch for a few rounds, and got a couple takedowns, and Panda kept getting back up, so he gave it to her by a slight advantage there. I say that's fair. You could maybe throw moderate, slight, whatever,
Yeah.
right? But that sounds about right. Takedowns, they gave the advantage to Panda, which I find a little. So this is one of the ones where it gets a little subjective, right?
Yeah.
Because he gave Angela Lee the advantage on the ground, but he gave Panda the advantage in the takedowns,
Yeah.
which is quite interesting.
I'm surprised by that. I would have said it was even at best.
But I think Angela landed more takedowns.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Panda, I think, maybe got on top once or twice, like through a scramble, but I don't think it was an active takedown that she was looking for. I can't actually remember if Panda successfully landed any takedowns. Nonetheless, Jeremy gave her the advantage there. I don't know exactly what he was thinking there, but I can't remember precisely what happened. They both ended up on the ground. From my recollection, Angela ended up on top a few times.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that they give us about 30 seconds to fill this thing out.
Yeah.
Right. We can't fill this out until the
End of the fight.
Yeah. And then, the decision has to be rendered like relatively quickly, right? Like, they're not like screaming at us to finish it, but there's also like a schedule, right?
Yeah,
Like, they're waiting in there.
Adverts are finishing.
So we're literally just like, basically what we do and what we were trained to do by one is to, as the fight gets toward the end, we still have to pay attention to the fight, but we have to start thinking about this a little bit before we actually write it. So we're still paying attention to the fight, but we're keeping in mind, once there's a minute left in the final round and you can kind of get a vibe on whether or not this thing is going to go to the distance or not, you start trying to like parse this stuff together. And then aggression, he gave a slight advantage to, actually even, he gave even on both. Which, yeah, I mean, because they were both aggressive in different portions of the fight.
Yeah.
Right? Like early on, Panda was more aggressive, especially in that first round. I think in the third round, she's probably more aggressive too. But, you could maybe be... okay, let me tell you now what I would do. Right? Jeremy and I are different. It's a subjective point. Near KO or submission, Panda, moderate advantage. I agree with that.
Yep.
Okay. Damage, also, I agree. Moderate degree of advantage for Panda. Striking, same. Moderate degree of damage. I would give the ground advantage to Angela Lee by slight, which is what Jeremy did. I would also give the takedown advantage to Angela Lee by slight, which he disagreed on. And then in the aggression, I think even is probably the best thing.
Yeah.
You maybe could put Angela by slight
But only
advantage
slight.
at the advantage toward the end of the fight.
Yep.
Right? So I might disagree with him on like a little tiny thing, but I can also see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Right? So this is actually what the one, and this is what I said on my response to the thread is like, this is actually people talking about one who actually worked there and actually breaking it down. You don't get this kind of content listening to fucking Brendan Schwab. Okay?
Not really an expert in 1FC, is he?
Yes.
Nice guy, but...
Some of them are rough. Like, I watched the Angela Lee one. It was, like, you can just tell he doesn't know what he's talking about. Even on Rogan will bring it up sometimes.
Yeah.
The nuances of the scoring criteria, a lot of people don't know unless you're in the scene.
Well, we were saying before we started filming that, like, if you watch this and you thought it was the UFC criteria, you'd have thought Angela Lee won under their criteria, but it's completely different because it's judged on the whole fight, not round by round.
And Angela Lee, I think you could make a strong argument that she would have won under the UFC rules.
You could have given her, maybe 4 out of 5?
I definitely would give her the second. Angela definitely won the second, which is crazy because she was hurt bad in the first round. But that was a round where she was clinching her up on the cage. I think she got a takedown. And I think she was threatening with a Darce or an Anaconda or some front choke or something like that. And then, you can still maybe give it to Panda, but I think in the UFC rules you might give it to Angela based on the push she made toward the end of the fight.
Yeah.
Right? But the UFC puts way more value on, like, control. And the round-by-round thing makes it totally different. So in preparing for the podcast today, I had a couple examples for you guys. You can watch this for free on YouTube now. Go back and rewatch the TJ Dillashaw Corey Sandhagen fight. Okay, TJ Dillashaw is fighting for the bantamweight title. He's fighting Aljo like in a month or something like that, right? And so they posted this fight free on YouTube, and I watched it today. And that is a fight that I can tell you 100% in one Corey Sandhagen would win that fight.
Yeah.
I mean, TJ Dillashaw's face is like falling off. He had his ACL tore by the heel hook in the second round, and that was like a really significant part of the fight. I mean, his face is just bloodied, right? But what Dillashaw was able to do was like pin him against the cage multiple times, clinch him, grind him out. He was still landing shots here and there, but he would get his moments of control.
Yeah.
And they put so much more emphasis on that, and as opposed to the damage. I mean, if you look at the damage, and the damage actually includes like physical damage. Like if you're cut, if you're bruised, if you're bleeding, are you switching your stance after you get leg kicked a bunch of times?
Yeah.
We count that. Like there was a fight, I think it was the previous show, maybe 2 shows ago, that I did with one, and one guy kept getting leg kicked, and he kept getting leg kicked, and as soon as I saw his stance change,
damage.
I was like, damage.
Yep.
And then he's really tender on that leg, right? So shit like that is way more valuable than like if you can pin somebody against the cage and hold them there. Another fight I thought of, this is like going back a little bit, but maybe the old school fans would know this, is when Rampage fought Lyoto Machida. I don't know if you remember this. This is quite an old school fight. But when Machida fought Rampage, like for the first 2 rounds, you know how like old school Machida was.
Yeah.
Like he was just impossible to touch, didn't land a lot of footwork, a lot of moving around. The round was like boring as hell, right? It was like the early rounds were like Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It was just a pitter pat, both guys on the outside. And then in the final round, Machida got on top of him, mounted him, and was controlling him, out-positioning him, beating him up from the top for the whole round.
Yeah.
By far the most dominant round of the entire fight. Like, it wasn't even fucking close.
Yep.
But Rampage squeezed out 2 early rounds by just, like, landing 1 or 2 more strikes or something like that, and then got dominated in the 3rd round and won because he edged those 2 rounds that were basically nothing. You could make them even. In one, for sure, Machida's going to win that fight.
Yeah.
Because having, like, a big moment is way more important than, like, even if it's even throughout, but one guy like slightly edges. That big moment when you really hurt somebody, or when you almost finish them, whether it's with a sub or a strike, counts for everything. Like that, it's really hard to dig out of that hole because damage is such a high priority. And in the case of this fight, I think this is exactly what you're looking at here. Panda did so much damage in the first round, and was competitive enough throughout, right? Because Panda was still landing shots all the way throughout the fight. Like, make no mistake about that.
Every time, not every time, but a lot of times Angela went in to try and get her up against the cage and go for a takedown, and she was getting clipped on the way in, and, like, clipped hard.
Yeah, Panda shots were doing more damage.
Yeah.
And even in the end, when they were, when maybe Angela was putting out more volume than she was, like, in the 5th round, in the 4th round, I think, Panda's shots, when she landed them, were more. They hurt more. They were more significant. They landed harder.
Yeah.
You can see that. You can tell the difference in the power.
And Angela was throwing shots to get into range and close her down for a clinch, and Panda was throwing shots to take Angela Lee's head off.
Yeah, and Angela really kind of struggles at moving her head off the center line when she's entering into the boxing range. Like, this is one, and I'm not shitting on Angela Lee. I'm just breaking it down as a person who watched the fight and has like somewhat of a degree of expertise in this, a little bit at least, right? And every time she's entering, just her head's right on the center line. And she's dealing, and there's dangers to entering, like moving your head a lot when you enter in as well. You know, look at like Dominic Cruz. When you're eating like Marlon Vera's head kicks that are coming in the side, right? Like when you should use head movement to enter into the range is when you're dealing with a boxer.
Yeah.
Right? Because most of those punches are coming in on the center line. And Angela's trying to blitz her to get a clinch or to get a takedown or something for the most part. Or when she enters into the range, she enters in like that. The problem is like when you're Thai trained, when you're trained by Thais, and there's a lot more round strikes coming at you via the kicks, right? When that stuff starts to happen, you really can't be like bobbing and weaving and rolling your head when you're trying to enter into the range because those round kicks can come in
the head.
Or knees can come up the middle if you start trying to roll to enter in.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like where the MMA meta is different when you're like dealing with a boxer or when you're dealing with a kickboxer or when you're dealing with a guy who's like or a girl who's like mostly Muay Thai trained, right? And every time you see her enter in, her head's on the center line, which can be okay against Thai fighters or people who train with a lot more round kick, heavy style, a lot more Thai style. But when you're dealing with Panda, who's so boxing heavy, like she should be entering into the striking range, moving her head off the center line, slipping and moving her head, dipping and rolling under to start to come up and land punches and then get into clinches and stuff like that. And I think with Angela, at least in the case of dealing with Panda, it's a tactics issue, right? Like she has the skills to beat Panda.
Yeah.
But she's just not adopting the best tactics in the fight, even though she got to her positions and was able to have success periodically. Like especially when she was clinching, she landed some good kicks throughout the whole fight. I think she like almost landed a head kick at one point in like the third or fourth round as well. So she was landing some strikes still, but her tactics and her strategy to deal with Panda's style doesn't seem like I don't feel like they're training her to fight Panda. I feel like they're training her to fight.
Yeah.
Rather than sitting there and like looking at her film and looking at her tendencies and look at what she does. What does she lead with? She's so heavy leading with the jab and the straight punches.
Yeah.
A very classic boxing style, right? Feints a lot with the front leg. Very heavy on that lead leg. Angela was trying to kick it a little bit. But I don't know. I guess, do you think they're going to do a fourth one? Do you want to see a fourth one as a fan?
It's a great fight. It's brilliant and engrossing, but we've seen it, 3 times now? It's probably enough for a while. Like, at least take a couple of years off from that one. Build someone else up and give them a shot.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll just finish up with the Angela Lee Panda thing. I think that the Panda won the fight. I think it was really close. You know, this was not by any stretch oh, yeah, obviously. No, it was a close fight.
Yeah.
Like, Angela was right there. Tough as shit. Super game. You know, I just feel like it's still young, right? Like, still fucking everybody. How old is she now? Can you check for me?
Can't.
She must be like, what, 23, 24? Is she something like that? Because I think Panda's like 30 plus, right? Like, Panda's still in her prime. And I think it's on the side there if you scroll over, Jake. Yeah. Let's see. What is she? 26. Okay, 26. So she's 26. So she's still got her prime. She's still in her prime for now, right?
Yeah.
But she's still got plenty of time to work in the division. She's one of the biggest draws and one. The fans loved her, right? Fans love both of them, actually. I mean, we're in Singapore, so there's a huge Chinese community here. And they were both cheering. Like, you were hearing a lot of people cheering for Panda as well. But great fight.